Good morning, everyone. My name is Sara, and I am privileged to serve as a member of the Standing Committee. I'm here to welcome all of you who are here in person and all of you who are online somewhere in cyberspace to First Church Unitarian. It's a lovely sunshiny day, and welcome to our annual honoring of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I hope you will enjoy the program. Please check your programs, and you will find a listing of our community matters put together by our very able office assistant, Blue. And she's got a lot of activities in here for you to read up on. I would just like to highlight, today is, if I can find it quickly, Susan, where are you? Help me, or Bob, help me out here. This is our Share the Plate Sunday, if I'm correct. And I have totally lost it and can't find it. Just say who it is. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. And the other point I would like to highlight is a special meeting of the Women's Alliance, where our own Reverend Lara is going to be speaking on something I've never heard of, called Autonomous Sensory Meridian. Stop. Wrong. What? Okay, now you all know the truth about me. This is an hour where I am really not awake. So, okay, it was yesterday and I missed it, and I hope you all had a great time. On that less than serious note, welcome to church.
Our call to worship this morning is A Mountain Called Inequality by Paul Beedle.
Speak a little louder, maybe.
Okay, sorry. The first step is to notice the mountain. It is there, and it belongs to a range of mountains. There is no going around it.
The next step is to reach the kind of acceptance that has us praying in our hearts, Lord, I don't ask you to move the mountain, just give me the strength to climb.
The step after that is where somebody, and then several somebodies, try to climb it. It's a hard climb. They explore, they find footholds, they blaze a trail or make a way out of no way. They climb, and finally one of them, and then another, reaches the top.
And the next step is they come back down and teach us about the climb and the view from the top and the promise of the other side.
With the next step, hikers follow the known trails and make them well worn. It's still a tough climb, but there are markers on the trail, and you're not up there all alone.
And then another step. Some new adventurers look for a mountain pass where a broad road can be paved. Many think that pass doesn't exist. They stick to the hard trails. But some believe in the highway, that the ascent should not require hiking gear, and that we can all go over together. And at last, the mountain pass is found, and a leader appears to help us take the next step to build that road.
That's where we are. America has a long and complicated relationship with a mountain called inequality. Let us worship.
I'd like to invite Natalie to light our chalice. And as Natalie lights our chalice, please join me in saying the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. Welcome. I join with Sara in welcoming you here to First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm so lucky to be serving this incredible congregation. If you are new with us this morning, whether here in person in the sanctuary or with us for the first time online, we're so glad that you're here. We hope to get to know you better, and our life is made better by your presence in it. So we really do hope that you will let us know you as time goes on. Some of you missed the ASMR presentation. But I will be uploading it if you want to watch it later. And that will make sense to you if you watch it, if it doesn't make sense to you now. So today is, in fact, our annual Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday, and I'm so happy you're with us. Our lay pastoral minister today is David Butts. If you're seeking some pastoral assistance, you could reach out to David, or other lay pastoral ministers, Jan Dustin and Patty Sardella. And I'm happy to announce we have 2 new lay pastoral ministers in training, Ann Donald and Linda Kaler. So you will have them in the future to reach out to as well. And of course me, and when I'm on sabbatical, Reverend Kathy. All right, let's start right out with our opening hymn. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. It's number 348, Guide My Feet. Lyrics will also be on the screens.
good? Good morning. It's gorgeous out, huh? So, I'm going to read this story called My Daddy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it's by one of his sons. I grew up with a famous father. My name is Martin Luther King III, but when I was a kid, my friends and family called me Marty, so no one would confuse me with my father, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When I was 5 years old, my dad gave one of his most famous speeches. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal, he declared. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I am the second of the 4 children he spoke about. There have been lots of books written about my father, but not a whole lot of books written about my dad. This book is about my daddy, what it was like to live with him, and how much I loved him. My sister Yolanda, who we called Yoki, and I wanted to go to Funtown more than anything. Well, kids, you know, Daddy's working very hard so that you and all children can go to Funtown, but it's not possible today, Daddy would say. Maybe next week. But that week never came. You just don't want to take us, Yoki wailed. And finally, my mother explained. We were not allowed in Funtown. The rides and the roller coasters were for white people only. That's how it was when I was growing up. My dad fought to change that. At home, though, my father was just Dad. He tossed the football with me, taught me how to shoot hoops, teased me, played with me. He would lift me up and put me on top of the refrigerator. I imagined swinging from the ceiling fan as if I were flying in my own airplane. And then Daddy would catch me as I fell into his arms. Away from home, things were different. It wasn't always easy being the son of Martin Luther King Jr. What's your name? 2 older boys asked. I don't remember, I said. I forgot. I knew it was wrong to lie. Why'd you say that, Marty? My mother asked later. You know your name. It's your father's name. I knew, and I knew why I hadn't said my name. Because I was afraid. Some people didn't like my father's work. He was stirring up trouble, they said. My father never stole anything or hurt anyone. Even so, he was thrown in jail more than 30 times. He had the courage to stand up and say, this law is unfair. And sometimes he was arrested for that. Once a neighbor was driving me home from school. On the radio, we heard that Reverend Martin Luther King and about 80 other people had been thrown in jail. I was terrified. I ran inside my house crying and asked my mother, why did Daddy go to jail? What did he do wrong? My mother hugged me. Your daddy went to jail to help people, she told me. Some people don't have enough to eat or comfortable homes or clothes to wear. They're not as fortunate as we are. Daddy went to jail to make it possible for all people to have those things. Don't worry, Daddy will be coming back. I carried her words close to my heart. A year later, when Daddy was arrested again, Yoki was afraid that he wouldn't be back for Christmas. This time, I was the one who consulted her. Don't cry, Yoki. Daddy will be back. He has to help people. He's already helped some people, but he has to help some more. And when he finishes, he'll be back. My father was not the only one in danger. Many people were hurt or even killed as they tried to change unfair laws. Once, as I marched in a protest, I saw a pretty lady with a bandage over her nose. My mother explained that she had been attacked by a police officer. The marchers were peaceful, but that didn't stop the people from trying to hurt them. Even police officers sprayed marchers with their fire hoses and turned dogs on them. Later, a police officer came up to us with a huge dog that growled at me. I was terrified. "It's okay, Marty," Dad told me as he took my hand. I felt safe. My dad was not a tall man, but he always made me feel like he was a giant. I was never afraid when I was with him. No matter how bad it got, my dad never fought back. We must meet violence with nonviolence. We must meet hate with love, he always said. Nonviolent wasn't just for marches and protests, it was for home as well. On Christmas, my brother Dexter and I got a toy gun for presents. Most of the other boys in the neighborhood played with guns, and we wanted to be just like them. But we knew guns were wrong, and they were not toys. They were machines to hurt and kill. Together, the whole family took the guns outside, made a bonfire, and destroyed them. That night, my brother and I watched our gifts burn. We believed we were destroying all the hate in the world. One bonfire couldn't fix everything, but some things were getting better. Like the law that kept black and white children from going to the same school. When I was in 3rd grade, the law was finally changed. My mother told Yoki and me that we'd be going to a new school in September. I didn't want to be the new kid who sat alone. Yoki felt the same way. "We don't want to go," we complained. "We don't want to be the only black kids at the school." My mother said she'd see what she could do. And the day before school started, we found out that 3 of our friends, the Abernathys, would be going with us to Spring Street School. I was glad to have my friends and my sister with me, because when we got to school, there were flash bulbs going off and TV cameras everywhere. Why did reporters want to talk to us? We were just kids going to school like everybody else. We were each in different classes. It was strange to be the only black kid in my class. I felt like everyone was staring at me the whole day. One kid even made a nasty comment. "Wouldn't you rather go to school with your own kind?" he asked. "Why aren't you at your own school?" "We're all the same kind. We're all kids. And Spring Street is my school now," I said. My father fought for us to be just kids attending the same school. It was what he meant when he said he dreamed of his children being judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. One school at a time, one child at a time, one heart at a time. That's how the world has changed. By reaching out to other people with kindness and compassion, my father was changing minds and unfair laws. He once said, "We have a power within us which is more powerful than the power of bullets." That power was love and faith. It was a bullet that ended my father's life, but it did not stop his message. It did not stop his work. My father was there to see me start school, but he wasn't around to see me graduate. I was only 10 years old when he was killed. I was so young when my dad died, but I'm blessed with the memory of a warm and playful man. And I'm reminded of him everywhere I go. There are streets and churches and schools named for my father in almost every city in the United States. And on the 3rd Monday of every January, we celebrate his birthday as a national holiday. These things honor his memory and keep his spirit alive. We must continue to change minds as my father did. We must continue my father's work for freedom and equality for all. It wasn't always easy being his son, but I'm so proud to be that son, and I'm so proud to share his name.
about once each month, this congregation, instead of taking an offering for our own ministries and good works, takes an offering to give to a well-deserving charity. And this month, the Share the Plate will go to Learning Up, and our own Lynn Cina will tell you more about that now.
Down a dirt path leading from the village, occasionally strewn with trash and potholes, the children walk each day to Macdellar School. Some of them are wearing secondhand shoes, some of them are not wearing any shoes. But once they get there, there's an open field, several open-air buildings, a huge water tank that's used for washing and drinking, and thankfully a lovely tree that throws some beautiful shade. A woman is working over an open fire, cooking lunch for the children, which, if their families can afford it, is 25 cents. But many of the children cannot afford it, and so they're given lunch. Some of the teachers will teach with their own infants tied with colorful cloth to their back, and it's always interesting to see the children trying to peek behind mom's back to see what the other kids are doing, and trying to nod to sleep while mom bends over to speak to her students or to dance with the other kids, with the children. From this plot of land, you can walk through crop fields down to Lake Volta. And there you'll see an elongated motorized boat that is used for fishing. The director of the school has hired some people to fish in Lake Volta and help to subsidize the school. There's also another large motorized boat that is used to go every Monday out to the islands where some of the students live on these pretty remote islands out there, and they're isolated from everyone. They live in mud and dirt huts, mud huts with straw roofs out there with no running water and no electricity. So the children are the trip takes about 45 minutes each way to go to the islands to pick up the students who come to the school and will spend the week sleeping in the dorms on a dirt floor, on mats, and there they'll receive an education. They'll also help with chores and join in the sports activities of the school. On Fridays, the same boat will take them back to their parents on the islands. Most of the students there live without running water, and even in the villages, and water must be carried great distances to the homes. Families that can pay a small tuition do, but children are eligible to go regardless of their family's ability to pay. The founder and head of the school, Mark, is a hardworking and caring teacher in his 30s. He founded the school out of a desire to teach children who live in poverty. The students learn reading, writing, soccer, dance, music, and culture at Macdellar. They're aware that this opportunity is a good opportunity for them, and their families are grateful because many of the children in Ghana are needed to help support their families and are not able to get an education. We had a great time visiting with these happy and excited students, but we also became aware of some of the difficulties of running a school with too few books, and only the few new computers we bought them, secondhand computers, and desks, a real poverty of desks. There are about 150 students in the school, and I only saw about 30 desks, handmade locally. FCU has been a great help to the school already, sharing the plate today, and the yearly yard sale that we put on that so many of you have donated items and work to. Since I'm on it, as an aside, I want to thank you also for the bottles and cans that you've given all year to where I send money to a school in Honduras for special ed students, as well as clean water projects there. But returning to Macdellar School, the one great need is desks for the children. They share these locally made simple desks, and learning to write without a desk is quite a challenge. A donation of about $25 will provide a locally made desk that will serve the school for years to come. Please consider this gift if you're able. Thank you so much for your generosity and love that you've shown to the world's children as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. During my sabbatical, I'll be spending the better part of the month of February there in Ghana at the Macdellar School. So I look forward to seeing more and telling you more about them as well. So this morning, if you are here in the sanctuary, any cash that you put into the offering plate will go directly to Learning Up and then to the school for these desks. If you are with us online, you will see that there is an address where you could mail in a check, or you could also go to that website to donate through PayPal. Make out any checks to Learning Up. This morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation. Please join with me in the words of our community response. We are grateful for the opportunity to give and serve, and grateful for the gifts we have received. May this affirm the ministries of our church community, both within and beyond these walls. Thank you. I'd like to ask our worship associates to light one last candle and let this represent all the joys and concerns that are with us this morning, but that remain unspoken. Thank you. Please join with me in the spirit of meditation or prayer. Once again, we have come together in love and trust, sharing those cares dearest to us with this gathered beloved community. This morning we hold in our thoughts and our hearts and our prayers those joys and concerns spoken aloud, as well as those that remain unspoken, as we share together in a time of sacred silence. Amen, and blessed be.
This morning's reading is an excerpt of a statement that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. made in Atlanta, Georgia on December 4th, 1967, addressing the Southern Christian Leadership Conference as its president. Here begin King's word. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference will lead waves of the nation's poor and disinherited to Washington, D.C. next spring to demand redress of their grievances by the United States government and to secure at least jobs or income for all. We will go there, we will demand to be heard, and we will stay until America responds. If this means forcible repression of our movement, we will confront it, for we have done this before. If this means scorn or ridicule, we embrace it, for that is what America's poor now receive. If it means jail, we accept it willingly, for the millions of poor already are imprisoned by exploitation and discrimination. But we hope with growing confidence that our campaign in Washington will receive at first a sympathetic understanding across our nation, followed by dramatic expansion of nonviolent demonstrations in Washington and simultaneous protests elsewhere. In short, we will be petitioning our government for specific reforms, and we intend to build militant, nonviolent actions until that government moves against poverty.
America is at a crossroads of history, and it is critically important for us as a nation and a society to choose a new path and move upon it with resolution and courage. It is impossible to underestimate the crisis we face in America. In a sense, we are already at war with and among ourselves. Affluent Americans are locked into suburbs of physical comfort and mental insecurity. Poor Americans are locked inside ghettos of material privation and spiritual debilitation. And all of us can almost feel the presence of a kind of social insanity which could lead to national ruin. Consider, for example, the spectacle of cities burning while the national government speaks of repression instead of rehabilitation. Consider a nation gorged on money while millions of us citizens are denied a good education, adequate health services, decent housing, meaningful employment, and even respect, and are then told to be responsible. We intend to channelize the smoldering rage and frustration of Negro people into an effective, militant, and nonviolent movement of massive proportions in Washington and other areas. Similarly, we will be calling on the swelling masses of young people in this country who are disenchanted with this materialistic society and asking them to join us in our new Washington movement. We also look for participation by representatives of the millions of non-Negro poor, Indians, Mexican Americans, Puerto Ricans, Appalachians, and others, and we shall welcome assistance from all Americans of goodwill. The survival of a free society depends upon the guarantee and survival of freedom and equality. This is what we seek.
Thank you to the members of our Racial Justice Action Committee, or RJAC, for helping with readings this morning. Exactly 4 months after giving the speech from which you just heard excerpts, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It's impossible to know how the Poor People's Campaign would have fared had he lived. By 1967, King was discouraged, very discouraged, that in spite of the civil rights movement victories that he and others had achieved in the 50s and earlier in the 60s, Black Americans were still not faring well financially. Very little, if any, improvement financially. About a year before his death, King told aides that the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, needed to create more pressure for Congress to pass an economic Bill of Rights for poor Americans, a radical idea that FDR had tried to make happen as well. And indeed, in the last year of King's life, the SCLC expanded on its civil rights mission and worked to challenge the Vietnam War, as well as working for economic justice. King thought of this as a shift from the work of reform to the work of revolution. Did you catch in his words? He said we should be militant and nonviolent. Still nonviolent, but militant. He meant business. He said, we have moved from the era of civil rights to an era of human rights. He'd always maintained, as you see below, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And the expansion of his vision proved that he really meant that. By 1967, King felt that President Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty was really just failing because everything was funneling into the war efforts. At a speech the year before he died at Riverside Church in New York City, King said, "You might not know it, my friends, but it's estimated that we spend $500,000 to kill each enemy soldier, while we spend only $53 for each person classified as poor, and much of that $53 goes for salaries to the people who are not poor." So, King continued, I'm increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and attack it as such. At a minimum, King hoped that the Poor People's Campaign would make Americans more aware of the crushing poverty that is right here in the United States, and that it would pressure Congress to address it. But ultimately, King and the Poor People's Campaign wanted a redistribution of wealth. This, his critique of capitalism, along with his anti-war activism, made him a far bigger threat to the establishment than when he was more focused on racial justice issues. The FBI had always followed King pretty closely, but they followed him and the movement even more closely that final year of his life. The Poor People's Campaign was trying, with some success, to unite the nation's poor across racial groups. And this is a particularly terrifying threat to white supremacy culture and the status quo that serves the powerful. That status quo of the powerful relies on the poor staying separated and divided by differences of race and religion and other categories, rather than realizing their collective power. As Professor Amy Nathan Wright of the University of Texas in Austin wrote, civil rights scholars tend to dismissively characterize the Poor People's Campaign as the last gasp of the civil rights movement, a failed campaign with no substantial lasting consequences. However, she argues that rather than simply being Martin Luther King Jr.'s last crusade, the Poor People's Campaign represents civil rights' unfinished business. The problems the campaign was trying to address, hunger, joblessness, homelessness, inadequate health care, a failed welfare system, and I would add, a largely failing public education system for people who are poor. These problems still persist, and people of color, particularly women and children, continue to experience these problems disproportionately. King's vision for the Poor People's Campaign was prophetic. King was always prophetic, a true prophet of the 21st century. He wanted there to be a tent city in the nation's capital as part of the Poor People's Campaign. And he didn't live to see it, but indeed, a month after his death, his tent city came to fruition, occupying Washington, D.C. for 6 weeks in a kind of shantytown with tents and lean-tos under the new SCLC leadership and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. And they called it Resurrection City. It's true that the Poor People's Campaign largely petered out in the 70s during the Nixon administration, but the legacy absolutely lives on. The 2011 Occupy Wall Street movement owed much to the Poor People's Campaign's creation of Resurrection City and its attempt to replicate that across the nation. Occupy Wall Street did exactly the same thing. The Occupy Wall Street movement also critiqued capitalism and war, especially at that time, the never-ending wars, it seemed, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and also made that connection between the wars and a failure to truly address poverty. Of course, Occupy Wall Street is also dismissed by many as a failed effort with no lasting consequences. But that's not true either. Martin Luther King and the Poor People's Campaign is the backdrop that ultimately led to Occupy Wall Street, and really, the United States of America has been forever changed. There are some, of course, who still believe that criticizing war and capitalism is inherently unpatriotic. But the younger generations of the United States of America think a little differently. Thanks to the backdrop of the Poor People's Campaign and Occupy Wall Street, younger generations of Americans don't automatically see socialistic policies as a bad thing. They seem to care more about the realities of the conditions that people live in, the reality of the well-being or lack thereof of people, rather than labels, political and economic labels. And they are, of course, interested in multiracial movements for social justice. How could it be otherwise in 21st century America? In 2017, a Poor People's Campaign Part 2 launched, known officially as the Poor People's Campaign, A National Call for Moral Revival, under the leadership of the Reverend William Barber II. And this new revival of the Poor People's Campaign has been working to bring forward those same kind of priorities that King had had. And the new Poor People's Campaign hasn't had that same level of press attention as King, not even close, but it has had some quiet successes, and it has, in fact, been growing slowly and steadily, a grassroots effort with which I would love to be more involved. There's nothing to like about war. I'm not sure I've ever met a ceasefire I didn't support. War is not the path to peace. There's nothing to like about poverty. There's nothing to like about the enormous economic disparities that we have among us still in this country, in many ways worse than ever. And really, there's no excuse for it. As King said, in a sense, we are already at war with and among ourselves with the disparities of wealth that exist. And as he said, all of us can almost feel the presence of a kind of social insanity which could lead to national ruin. Tackling poverty, of course, is no easy task. Even Jesus said, quoting Deuteronomy, "You will always have the poor among you." But of course, the rest of the verse in Deuteronomy is, "Therefore I, God, command you, you shall open wide your hand to your sibling, to the needy, to the poor in your land." It doesn't mean don't fight poverty because it's never ending. It means you are always and forever obliged to fight poverty. You are always and forever obliged to be generous and do what you can to help those in need. We are those living thousands of years later who have resources for doing things at a mass scale that Jesus certainly never could have imagined. We have resources today that King couldn't even have imagined. And we are the ones that have to create a vision and the means for systemic change, the ones who must envision and implement paths to eradicating poverty. And we can make anything happen if we have the will to make it happen. We are the people. Another world is possible. Martin Luther King did everything he could in his brief 39 years on earth to work toward another world. The rest of that work is up to us. It is our work. Let's be on our way to making it so. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn is number 116, "I'm on my way," which is a kind of call and response. You'll also see the words on your screen as well as in the hymnal.
our closing words. If you're comfortable, you may hold hands with the person near you, or touch shoulders or feet or elbows or anything that works for you. Or simply put up your hands and feel the energy between us and those who are with us virtually as well. Friends, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream was so much broader than many people realize. It was nothing short of peace and justice for everyone, meaning everyone. We have the resources to make this world what we want it to be. We have to have the will, we have to have the vision. We know another world is possible. May it be our mission to make it so. Blessed be, and amen. Please be seated.